As an information technology professional, specifically as someone like you and I that might need to troubleshoot IT problems, we've got some tremendous job security, as we're going to see in this nugget. Why? It's because there's a tremendous amount of things that could go wrong. We'll tour some of the symptoms of PC problems in this nugget. So I would say the most terrifying thing that can happen to you with your PC, the most terrifying symptom is when it just shuts off. Yeah, absolutely. That is scary. Or it just absolutely restarts. And that's on our list, by the way. So a spontaneous shutdown or a restart, that is a big deal. That could be a hardware problem. It could be related to software. And we will have a nugget on tools to troubleshoot this kind of stuff, and also a nugget on troubleshooting methodologies. But back to the story at hand. In this photograph, notice what's happening behind these poor musicians. It's the Windows blue screen of death. Next to a spontaneous shutdown or restart, this has to be one of the most terrifying things. Now, it's not as bad as a spontaneous restart or shutdown because we get some information on the blue screen of death that will help us troubleshoot. So there'll be like an error code that we can at least research with Microsoft to try and figure out why we're getting this blue screen of death. By the way, regarding your blue screen of death, Microsoft finally gave us a kindler, gentler version. That's right, with more plain language that you're in trouble and even a little frowny face. How fun. Down the bottom in the smaller text is what's most important for us, though. They're still giving us an error code to search on. And I know, it's not fair. Microsoft gets made fun of so often for the blue screen of death. If we had a Mac equivalent that we could poke fun at, it's the pinwheel. Yeah, this little spinning wheel that would happen when, your application is doing something. That's normal on the Mac. It's like the old hourglass in Windows. So the spinning pinwheel, though, might never stop. And then it's called the pinwheel of death on the Mac, and you typically have to force quit the application that's causing this issue. Now, what if your system can't even boot? Well, think about it. If the boot failure happens like right away and you don't get any information about what's going on, it's probably some hardware component or a problem with the BIOS. But if you get information, if you get textual information, you're in so much better shape because now you can search on that error and find out potential causes. If it's Windows giving you very specific information, for instance, then you could search on what exactly we're going to do with that particular error message. Remember, we'll be covering the tools that we would use to solve these issues in the next nugget. What if your users weren't trained by you on how to properly shut their machines down? We call them graceful shutdowns. Well, that could be a real problem for one main reason. I mean, if they're going to their machine, I don't care if it's a Windows device or a Mac device or a Linux device, and they're pulling the power plug in order to shut it off. What's the main problem? Well, really, the main problem is some type of file corruption. At the least, files that they're working on in applications. At the worst, files that are called system files that are used to make the machine run smoothly. So please teach your users how to gracefully shut down those operating systems that you're using. When it comes to devices that you plug in working correctly, what's the big thing that controls them? Well, they're drivers. And remember, the device manager inside of Windows would allow us to check on these devices and their drivers. And if there is a device in error or something that wasn't recognized, you would discover that here. Now, earlier in this nugget, I mentioned that if someone's just yanking the power cord on their computer, it could harm system files. A dynamic link library file, or DLL, is a great example of a Windows system file that would go missing. Really, it's corrupted most likely, but you would get errors like this about things failing to start because of missing dynamic link library files. By the way, viruses love to do this kind of stuff. So oftentimes you'll have users calling you saying, hey, look, I know how to shut down my PC and my PC's been just fine. I did download some applications though, and now I've got these missing DLL messages popping up all over the place. It's time for us to do some virus scanning because this is often the type stuff that viruses will do to a system. It doesn't matter what operating system you're running. Remember, too, that the functionality of the OS is made up of services, and that the Mac, the Linux boxes, the Windows boxes will all give you a way to check if the services are healthy and how they're configured to start. Are they going to start automatically? Are they going to start manually? Are they been literally disabled by someone with administrative privileges? And remember, too, there's been so many versions of Windows that you may have apps that are failing to function the way you want them to because they are not compatible with the current version of Windows you're using. You have an old app. Yeah, sorry. Or maybe it's a new app, but Windows just recently updated. Any case, you know that we're going to cover with you tools to help in this regard. And it is worth reminding you once again, this problem is not exclusive to Windows. So you're going to find this in other operating systems as well, that you update the OS and then you've got apps that are having problems. Now, how many times do we hear this one from our users? You know, my computer's running slow. Well, remember, this is time for us to really investigate. And what's great to have is what are called baselines. You're going to have baselines so you know how fast their system should perform. You know how fast their internet should perform. You know how fast they should be able to save things to the network, for example. You know how fast it should be to boot their system, shut down their system, operate their system. You get the idea. And don't forget, we're going to have powerful tools across all of our operating systems that will allow us to closely monitor the system to see what might be hogging the CPU, what might be hogging memory, what might be communicating over the network way too much. Now, here's a really interesting one because it is either a symptom or it's a tool. It's safe mode. You see, a user may call you and say, boy, nothing looks right. And everything's really just at this yucky, like plain color, and the images aren't as sharp, and what's going on here? And they have booted into safe mode because there's most likely some type of a driver issue, and Windows is in a little bit of a panic, so it's taken itself into safe mode. But we also use it as a tool, as you can see here, because you might try safe mode as a startup option to see if those drivers or things are causing you a problem with normal boot. So, both a symptom and a tool, Windows Safe Mode. Another symptom that can be a bit of a headache for us is your user can't open their file. There's so many reasons why this could happen, so we really need to get information from them on exactly what the error dialog says. Hopefully we get a lot of information like shown here, but just what exactly is being said is typically going to go a long way to help us figure out exactly why they can't open their file. So as I'm sure you've already gotten a sense for, it's pretty easy for things to go missing. And these cause symptoms of problems that are really, really obvious. How about this one? I love it. Missing operating system. Yes, that's one of the things that could go missing. The NT loader is responsible for loading many versions of Windows. That needs to be in place. The boot INI on a Windows machine dictates what options we are presented in like a dual boot type scenario. But even in a non-dual boot scenario, we need the boot INI. The graphical user interface for your Linux might go missing, or the boot menu program. The older one's called Lilo, by the way. The newer one's called Grub, and this dictates the options that you get for booting your system. Any of these things might go missing, and this is going to cause a real obvious symptom for the user, because with any of these, they're not going to be presented with the operating system that they know and love. Now, as we wrap up our list of symptoms we need to be aware of, I want to revisit something. Remember the Windows blue screen of death? That is a crash of the operating system, and the machine will reboot itself at some point. So the entire OS is what we call toast in that situation. We talked about the pinwheel of death on the Mac, and we weren't all that fair because the pinwheel of death is a stuck application. There is the equivalent of the, entire Mac or even a Unix box or a Linux box, the entire operating system crashing. And just so you know, they call this in those worlds kernel panic. So a kernel panic is when the operating system malfunctions so badly, like a blue screen of death, it has to literally freeze up. Now, the last symptom that we need to cover together is the case of someone with multiple monitors and they're maybe misoriented. The right-hand side of the desktop is over on the left monitor and the left-hand side of their desktop is over on the right monitor. It's a nightmare. Or the mouse isn't behaving as they would expect as they go between monitors. Remember, we're going to have tools like Control Panel in Windows and display settings that would help us with monitor orientation. But for this nugget, we just need to realize that this is another common symptom that might generate help desk calls. In fact, from my own experiences, I remember how common this is with our traveling sales representatives of our organization. They'll be in a meeting, they will connect another display, and they will have absolutely no idea how to get that additional display to do what they want in the meeting. So they call you in a panic. My dang PC is slow. Help, help, I started it and there's this black screen with white letters. Man, I'll tell you, I can't open this file. There's so many reasons that we could be awoken in the middle of the night with a dire distress call from one of our important users. In this nugget, we took a look at a lot of different symptoms that may present themselves, and we'll be elaborating on how to fix all this stuff, obviously, in future nuggets of this course. I sure hope this nugget was informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.